It's really interesting, the behavior change that happens with your customers when you have somebody who's not the founder selling that product. As the founder, you have this magic wand. You can make all problems go away. That tinfoil type buyer, you're not fooling them. They know very well that they're buying from a founder and there is no sales team. It's just you. So their motives are very different. And so they're willing to work with you. They're willing to work through the warts.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SaaS Builder Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wootton, and today we're going to discuss how founders can directly impact their customer success strategy and operations. Joining me is John Gleeson, who's a general partner and founder at Success Venture Partners, which is a venture firm that leverages deep expertise in customer success to help early-stage startups achieve product-market fit and scale efficiently. Before founding Success Venture Partners, John was VP of Customer Success at Motive, where he played a key role in growing revenue from $1 million to over $300 million. So he's seen it. He's been there, done that. And so welcome, John.
Hey, yeah, Randy, I'm so stoked to be here today. This is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm honored
I really
to be on.
Yeah, it's really fun on the pre-brief and looking forward to the conversation. So we'll get into it. And what we want to talk about specifically is setting the stage in terms of how do founders think about customer success. And can you provide your perspective on the current state of how founders play in shaping customer success within their startups?
Yeah, for sure. So I talk a lot about this concept. I call it founder-led customer success. And it all comes from my experience. So before Motive, I was actually the first hire in a startup. So pre-product market fit, moved to New York City, and job number one was just knock on a whole bunch of doors. It was, will our way in front of people that we thought could be customers. Eventually we got in front of them. Eventually we learned a little bit from them, did that whole customer discovery piece, built a little product. I became seller number one, sold that, for proverbial first $1 million in ARR in a startup, and started to work with these customers. And that was actually where the real magic actually started to happen. It wasn't actually in selling to these customers. It was in supporting them, where we learned what our product had to be. We learned how to onboard them, how to get them to that point of value quickly, how to expand them, how to build trust with them. All these things informed our ability to actually find product market fit, build something that our customers actually wanted. So yeah, I've coined this term. I call it founder-led customer success, because in the beginning, founders, when you're doing founder-led sales, you're also doing that work of making your customers wildly successful. The interesting thing on it too is, like you said in the intro, I went on to build a really, really big customer success organization. And, at scale in Motive, $300 million in ARR, what did I care about? I cared about renewals. I cared about NPS, were our customers actually satisfied? I cared about our time to value. How fast could we onboard a customer? And when I think back on it, those were actually the same measurements that I was using to find product market fit, or we were using to find product market fit. I didn't quite call them that, but it was would they stick around? Oh, renewal. Would they actually set up their profile? Would they go through the onboarding flow? Oh, okay, cool. Would they refer their friends? If they liked it, would they tell me a lead for somebody else? Well, that's kind of like NPS,
Yeah.
Are you willing to share this with others? So there's a lot in common with customer success at scale in a big organization, and actually what founders are doing in the very early stages of company building.
Well, let's dig in on that. As we talked about in the pre-brief, I had some background and experience with customer success. I had done it at Microsoft, and then I went over to Salesforce working for Maria Martinez and helped build out the offerings that we were trying to sell. I didn't have the teams reporting to me that were delivering it. But as you know, Salesforce is really one of the early innovators in the idea of how do you drive customer success and customer loyalty, because that's where the predictability and the revenue comes from, right? That's that gross retention and net retention that you're focused on.
And Maria is she's the OG. Actually, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now to see.
Nick Mehta wrote a book, and then Maria wrote the forward to the
foreword of that book, right?
That's right. Yeah. But she was the one, and her big insight was to turn customer success into a profit center. Because I think a lot of companies think about, before customer success and SaaS, it was about support. You had on-prem software and you had break-fix support that people would pay for. They would pay 15% or whatever. But for the vendors, it was all about cost optimization. So you ended up with trying to get teams out of India and try to get off the call. And I think what Maria, with her experience at Microsoft and then bringing it to Salesforce, was like, no, no, no. There's real value in customer success and people are willing to pay for it. So it
Mhm.
goes beyond just paying for the software, is you want to pay for success. We called it Premier Success and then a whole set of services that we offered. But it's how do you get the most out of the software? And I think customers are reasonable in that they realize that they need training, they need advice, they need counsel. So let's go back to kind of that early stage founder. They're thinking about this idea of founder led sales. And I love the distinction you draw between product market fit being defined as the salesperson is like, oh, I got people who paid me money and signed up. But for you, product market fit is really defined in that next step. They get implemented and adopted. Can you just touch on that a little bit? You called out a couple of things in your initial comments, but like, why you think product market fit is really defined post sales, not pre sales.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I thought I knew about product market fit in my first startup. And I think we had inklings of product market fit and we certainly sold and we got to, like $10 million in ARR. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So I thought I knew about product market fit in that company. I really learned what product market fit looked like in the second company, in Motive, right? We had such an acute product market fit. The market was pulling us. I sometimes felt like we were succeeding in spite of ourselves. We could make every mistake possible, but the pull of the product, the value of what we were doing was so strong that the customer pulled us through. And I think that's what true product market fit really feels like. There's a famous quote, like, if I were to pull the product away, if I were to take it away, how much would the customer scream? And I
Yeah.
think so much of your go to market challenges are fixed just by incredible product market fit. So I'd say sometimes founders, when I talk to them and I spend most of my days talking to founders, they want to jump right to that last phase of product market fit, that commercialization, that customer development, adding more customers. But pause there for a second because it's like you really need to feel that product market fit piece in your bones before you throw a log on the fire. And I'll give you a great story on that. So it was 2022. We're like post peak ZERP, let's call it. All my friends in ventures started to call me. They would be like, hey, John, like, we've got this company. We invest in them. They're awesome. We love the founder. This is great. But they've got a massive churn problem. And yeah, I probably do it that way too. Like that's pretty good. And I quickly realized, like, I don't think they need to fire their head of customer success. I don't think they're doing it wrong. I actually think they have a bigger problem, which is like they've fallen out of product market fit.
Of product market fit. I think that's such an interesting insight in terms of you get out early. You as
Yeah.
the founder kind of establish, you know, the pain because that's why you built the company, right? You're solving that pain and you get your first couple of customers on board, get them up
Yeah.
and running. And then you get this next inflection point where you start to scale a little bit. And maybe as a founder, you've lost touch with that core pain or the pain has evolved. So say a little bit more about that, like
Yeah.
falling out of product market fit. And then what can you do to bring yourself back into product market fit?
Well, and so that was the exact thing. They'd fallen out of product market fit before their very eyes, right? They'd raised some money. You raise money, you add more sellers. All of a sudden, you've got a lot of signals in the noise, more people, well, more problems. You find yourself not in the room with your customer. And if you recall, too, 2022, you roll into 2023, OpenAI launches ChatGPT. The world starts to shift. Things
Yeah.
that were once magical, that maybe gong like experience of call recording, that like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. When now, we're on a podcast recording, but if we were on a regular recording, there'd probably be 15 note takers that would jump in before we could even jump in, right? The magic was lost. The innovation had just spiked. And, the whole market was shifting and they were losing sight of what their true value was. So to like bring it back to the start, it's not necessarily in selling to a customer that you find product market fit. That's the promise. It's, hey, I'm willing to take a bet on you. I think what you've presented to me is pretty darn cool. I like it. But it's that renewal when they're
Yeah.
saying, hey, not only did you make this promise, but like that thing that you said you would fix, we've worked on this for a year together, maybe it's even a month together, and you've delivered on that. I can see my life is better because of you. That's where product market fit comes from. It's the delivery of value where you know that, hey, if you were to pull the product away, you'd have a fighting chance at them screaming and yelling to give it back. And that's where you really want to be.
Yeah, I think of Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm in that when you're launching a product and you have the whatever the early stage group is, I think it's lead users and then early adopters. And some lead users are going to tolerate issues because they're getting a good price. They're your lighthouse win, or they just like to be super innovative and being on the cutting edge. And so it's kind of like once you've moved into those early adopters that have, an appetite for a little bit of hair on the deal and a little bit of rough around the edges on the product. But if they validate your solution through a renewal motion, and that really determines product market fit.
Oh, well, okay. So here, I'm going to steal your questions for a sec, but here's another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, founders especially, going from that founder-led sales, founder-led customer success motion to like the commercialization phase, right? So here, like what happens next? Generally, you do founder-led sales, you maybe get 10, you get 20, you raise a little bit of a seed round or maybe a series A if you're lucky, and you go and you build a sales team out, right? You hire 2 by 2 into the arc we all go, and you've got more sellers on your side. It's really interesting the behavior change that happens with your customers when you have somebody who's not the founder selling that product, right? As the founder, you have this magic wand, right?
Totally.
You can make all problems go away. That tinfoil type buyer, the one who you're not fooling them. They don't think that you are, Salesforce that they're buying from. They know very well that they're buying from a founder and there is no sales team. It's just you. So their motives are very different, right?
Yeah.
And so they're willing to work with you. They're willing to work through the warts.
Yeah.
Transpose that onto like AE number 4 or 5
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
6, right? The customer has no patience for that person, right? It was just another sale. It's totally bigger than that. And so I always say to founders, like, watch the vintages of customers that come in. So there's, the vintage that you sold, then there's the first 2, which those sellers are kind of an extension of you. You probably helped them close those deals. That vintage is kind of interesting. Did they renew? And now like watch that next vintage. What's the renewal rate on those? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And that's also another barometer of product market fit, right? If you can have, and it's a lagging indicator, right? So it's a hard thing, but you've got to go back and you've got to look at those cohort renewal rates to really, test like, hey, can AE number 5 sell a deal that renews as well? Can they, is there congruency between that value across these next sellers that we add in? And I think that's like the real building blocks for building an enduring company.
Well, it's super interesting because we just announced this acquisition of RevOps on Monday, which is a CPQ solution. They're relatively small, smaller than us at Maxio. We have 2,000 customers, and Adam, the CEO, is an extraordinary founder. He co-founded it with another guy, John. Wonderful. But we're going through the interviews of the customers. Say, hey, so welcome to Maxio. And what is so kind of reaffirming is all the customers love Adam. He sold them the deal. They're like, he's an extension of their team. Clearly, he's spending a bunch of time, working with them, identifying the use case, the workflows. And to your point, he's got the magic wand to say, we need to go to build these things. And so I think it's a great advice in terms of the steps for which you go through to create the founder-led customer success, right? You're the founder-led sales. You bring these folks on, and then we talked in our pre-brief about there being kind of 4 steps. The first step is just recognizing your responsibility for the customers as the founder, even if you're a technologist, right? Like you got to make sure the customers are getting up and running, and you're using that input to direct and define the roadmap. Number 2 was the first hire. And so you talked a little bit about that. It's a very different person you hire when you're the founder hiring your first salesperson, your first customer success person. They need to really be an extension of you. And you're not looking for the person that's coming in that's going to go scale the sales team. They still need to be kind of almost like biz dev. They're going to take care of everything. And then we talked a little bit about the PMF, product market fit, comes from that customer validation. And then we talked about step 3. So now you've made it through kind of the bootstrap, you've gotten some angels, you've tapped all your friends for the money, and you're approaching Series A. How do you think about that, John, in terms of the set of things you're looking for to introduce to customer success at that stage? So you've hit that inflection point, you're taking some private money. What changes?
Well, firstly, I like to smirk because at that point, like let's say this was a Success VP portfolio company, my work would be done here a little bit
Mm,
because we really try and help founders with that gap between you get your first customer, bring on some cohorts of customers. Eventually, maybe you raise that Series A, you graduate out of that seed, pre-seed where we invest at, and you hire your first head of customer success. And I like to think like that's when my work is done. That's when my hand holding is done. And we can just pair that company with one of our LPs who are the best customer success leaders in the world. But I think that's where, okay, so there's an interesting thing that happens here. Okay. So you have some incredible customer growth, right? You have hired a bunch of salespeople. You maybe now have hired your first head of sales. Okay. The knee jerk reaction in a lot of organizations is to start to build customer success in a similar way to what you're building your sales function as. So, what are you doing on the sales side? On the sales side, you are codifying the whole process, right? Software, like we want software to be multi tenant in nature, meaning that customer A is using the software for the same reason and getting the same outcome as customer B, right? So we want to see like that congruency on the sales side. So what we're doing is we're building our funnels. We've got a quarter over quarter cadence starting to form on the sales side. We've got talk tracks, we've got playbooks, we've got battle cards coming together. We're starting to coach this team into an army of sellers, right? And we
yeah,
hope that
a sales system with a methodology, process, tools, everything to create replicable sales, because that's what you're looking for on the booking side. And it's a numbers game, it's an activity game. Do this way. What's the
exactly.
distinction then for customer success?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing about this is you want it to be that repeatable, predictable selling. The reality is like what happens in that mix? Well, some of those hires aren't going to work out. All right. So you've got kind of this organizational thrash because some people just aren't making it. That happens no matter if you're really good, all organizations go through. Number two, hey, you're going to this like quarter over quarter machine. Sellers are not bad people at all. I came up through the sales organization. I think I'm a good person. Sellers are good people at their core. But you know what? When you've got a quarter over quarter pressure on you,
Yeah,
you're going
totally.
to push a deal. You're going to squeeze that customer, and maybe the roadmap feature isn't quite there, but you're just going to wedge them in. Come on, let's get them over the line. We got to hit the quarter. So you see some poor fit customers in the mix. And then in the same breath, in the same way that you went on this journey to find product market fit, each of these sellers are also on their own journey of figuring out how to attach this to customers, how to sell it to them. They're kind of finding their own version of like seller market fit, let's call it that. And so what happens in customer success organizations, that first head of CS comes in and they're like, I'm going to add a lot of structure. I'm going to add some rigor and we're going to have our processes. And there's a certain component of processes. I would say like focus on like your onboarding process, how you like onboard your customers. That's really important. But you also need to bake in enough capacity in your organization so that you have some buffer room. All
Yeah,
right. Because you think of it as like, you need some cartilage in your knees in order to jump
yeah,
high. You need a bumper pad here. And the bumper pad ends up actually being the customer success organization. They're the extension of the founder. They need time to absorb those poor fit customers. And maybe it's poor fit now, but maybe it could be a right fit. Maybe it informs a roadmap. I would often observe at Motive, Keep Truckin' was what it was called in the early days. Our AEs would come over and they would hang out with the CSMs in that first onboarding team because we didn't have enough resource to enable all these sellers. They wanted to know the customer. We're selling to the trucking industry. They didn't come from that industry. So who would they gravitate towards? They come over and they hang out with the CS organization because that was a source of institutional knowledge.
yeah.
So you need to have like a certain amount of buffer room in your organization in order to facilitate that.
You called it squish when we
Squish.
were meeting before, which I thought was great, is this idea of flexibility because not all customers are the same. And to your point, you're trying to sell them a similar situation, but they often in workflow automation tools, people are still trying to define their own processes and they're going to do it differently and they have different requirements. And so in some ways, customer success is the buffer between the promise of the technology and the reality of the technology. And
Yeah.
how do you adjust and accommodate lots of different customers that are coming through? And I think to your point, so that's one of the things that businesses miss is they try to codify or instantiate too much structure and process at too soon at a stage of a company on the customer success side.
Yeah, you build rigidity at a time when the organization needs the most flexibility. And I spend a lot of time with, wonderful people who are building at OpenAI or building these next generation tools. And I ask them, like, what does a comp plan look like for your CSMs? And they're actually still in a mode where it's just a base. There's no
Yeah.
variable component. And the reason for that is you need people to have the capacity where they're not so worried about just hitting a particular number. Like what gets measured gets done. But when you're not quite sure the ins and outs of what needs to get done, you need that organizational capacity to flex a little bit. Certainly, you can't let that run forever. Please, nobody interpret that as CSM should not have comp plans. They absolutely should. But as the leader of it, you start to need to figure out how this post-sales motion bolts onto your entire organization.
And it's different. It's a different entity. It's not just sales. It's not pre-sales, post-sales. It's a whole different philosophy, structure, approach. I mean, Nick Mehta, we were talking about at Gainsight, has done this better than anyone in terms of articulating it and learning about it. But John, thank you for your insights.